My mom was raised by an abusive, schizophrenic mother. The second oldest of 7 children, the rules of the game were always changing for her. At 18, she married a man who, while not schizophrenic, was erratic. It was a pattern that she knew. By the time my sister and I came along, my mom had found a way to bring order to her life. We were told what to say, how to dress, and who to be. Living in Fort Worth, her template was equal parts Southern Belle and Southern Baptist. My childhood was full of morality tales, both real and manufactured. I was so afraid of making a misstep that I grew up as perfect as I could possibly be. I never cursed. I never snuck out. I didn't even chew gum in class. I attended a small Baptist university that really appreciated perfect kids who made straight A's. The rules were stated in the admissions policy, in weekly chapel services, and on signs in the halls, and I followed them diligently until I started dating John. For the first time in my life, I didn't care what anybody else wanted. It was the first real adventure I had ever had. He was smart, funny, and I suddenly understood the term sexual chemistry. Somehow, I didn't even feel guilty. But there were consequences. I took a home pregnancy test in the back of my dorm room closet. Afterwards, I was careful to fold up the box and the bag and take it to the dumpster outside so there would be no evidence. The results were inconclusive. I scheduled a test at a clinic in a part of town where I didn't think that I'd run into anybody that I knew. Sitting in the waiting room, I was so self-conscious. I spun my class ring around to look like it was a wedding band. The test was quick, but the results weren't. They said they'd call me in a few hours. I drove to John's house and we waited together. We talked about everything except what we were going to do if I were pregnant. We ordered a pizza. The call from the clinic came just as the pizza arrived. It sat unopened on the kitchen counter. The long drive to tell my parents was filled with dread. I knew how my dad reacted when I just spilled a drink at the table. Luckily, he was at work. I could start with my mom. Sitting on the edge of the floral sofa, I clung to John's hand, and I tried hard to look my mom in the eyes instead of looking at the floor. Mom, I'm pregnant. My stomach dropped as I waited. For the first time, I was in the proverbial doghouse, and I had no coping skills for this. Mom did the only thing she knew to do. She firmly told John and I we were getting married in 2 weeks. My makeshift wedding was small in a rectangular room in the church I grew up in. I remember wishing it had been prettier. The whole day went by in a blur. I was in my last year of college. People who had once been close friends treated me as an outsider. A guy I loved like a brother called me a slut. I should have been angry because I happened to know he was sleeping with his girlfriend, but instead I just cried and felt like a bad person. John joined the military, so soon we left the world I grew up in to travel. As we moved from station to station, the only people we had to depend on was each other. Figuring out rent and bills was hard, but it was a thrilling victory when we got to the end of the month without overdrawing our account. Our son Chase didn't seem to mind our lack of experience parenting or a lack of resources. When the Army sent us to Panama, I strapped Chase in the back of my little red car, and I explored the country armed only with my high school Spanish. I shopped exhaust-filled streets like Central, pushing a baby stroller. And soon, our son was joined by a baby sister. When John's tour was over, we moved back to DFW just in time for an old friend's wedding. I told John on the drive about each one of my church friends and what cool people they were. When we got to the wedding, I was only welcomed by the bride. No one else really spoke to me. That feeling put me right back in my mom's living room. I cried all the way home. And while John supportively told me what jerks they all were, something in me believed that they were right. Almost in penance, I started following the rules again, my mom's and everyone else's. I expected the payout of acceptance, but it never came. There were always just more expectations. We didn't have much money, so I got a job working with educational consultants. After work, there were PTA meetings, church events, and sports practices. I cooked for potlucks, signed permission slips, and felt like I had to do it all while looking good, which simply wasn't happening. I was way too tired. Being a wife and mom became this treadmill I could not get off of. My break with the world of demands came in a seemingly innocent choice of defiance. My boss was vegetarian. As a Texas girl, I could barely fathom how someone could survive without eating meat. The first time I saw tofu sitting uncooked in its little tray of water, I thought it was disgusting. She was unaffected by my criticism, so I became curious. I started reading and questioning what I'd been taught about eating. A book I read by Mary Lou Henner was a turning point. I stripped my kitchen. Fruit Loops, Kraft mac and cheese, Dr. Pepper, all got their walking papers. I thought that changing what I put in my mouth was a personal choice, but I found myself under attack. My son dramatically announced that Mary Lou Henner had ruined his life. When I wouldn't buy goldfish at the store because I said that they weren't healthy, my 4-year-old daughter asserted, yes, they are, we eat them at church. People stopped inviting us over for dinner. But making the first choice in a long time that was exclusively for me was empowering. I lost 30 pounds, got dramatically clearer skin, and I had so much more energy. Cooking became an adventure. The produce in my kitchen was a variety of colors. I fell in love with whole foods. It started a revolution in me. I learned I could say no, even if it went against what other people thought was good for me. This new sense of freedom inspired me to look at other areas of my life, like my schedule. John's and my marriage had become about the business of being parents. I missed dating. And when I learned that John did too, we conspired to take back Saturday nights. Then we upped the schedule ante. We committed to being home together 4 nights a week. We started grocery shopping together, which became a game where John would try to sneak contraband like Little Debbie's. We learned that there is no quality time without quantity time. In the beginning, people got frustrated because we weren't as accessible, but then it was just normal. My life is now full of little experiments. Some of them have turned out great, like blogging and learning to illustrate. Others were not so successful, like when I got rid of my car and bought a scooter off Craigslist. I have learned this. A life spent coloring outside the lines means you have to be willing to navigate the doghouse. But here's the thing. The doghouse can be pretty great if you design it yourself.